What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with NIO, Tesla, SPY, and the overall market. I want to talk about some big updates that just came out involving the tariff news and what this can mean for the market moving forward. But just know that I am not a financial planner, so make sure you take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $2,000, you're guaranteed 30 in total. And the offer ends very soon at the end of March. Anyways, as far as NIO is going, we got this big jump all the way down to about the $4 area before we saw some buyers defend us and bring us back up to about 4.29. That's a good sign for NIO as there are buyers trying to defend it, but whether or not we continue to pump or dump depends on some factors. So what happened? The market got some bad news that came out about how we're going to be looking for a big shift in economic policy. Donald Trump announced that he wanted to increase tariffs on Canada and Mexico to 25% and 10% on China. He also mentioned that when it comes to these changes, he's going to be looking for about 10% for petroleum for Canada and factors just like that. In response to this, Canada wanted to retaliate. They mentioned that they're going to be increasing tariffs on U.S. goods, or about $100 billion worth of U.S. goods, to about 25%. And then after that, Mexico said that they would likely do something very similar. They wanted to retaliate as well. So there's all this fear in the markets. That's why we got this big dump that happened. That's why we saw SPY dump all the way down to about 590. We saw Tesla dump all the way down to the 370s. Big sell-off. That's why NIO came down as well. But then we got some new news that came out. And then what it basically happened was intraday, the market has basically responded to the fact that the tariffs have been delayed. So there's a big shift that happened during these negotiations from between the US and Mexico and the US and Canada. So let's talk about that in just a couple of minutes. I first want to mention that as far as NIO is going, we got some decent news. Their overall sales came out. They delivered about 13,863 vehicles in January 2025. That's about a 37.9% growth year over year. And we saw about 7,900 of their company's premium smart electric EVs. That came from the brand NIO, and about 5,900 came from Onvo. So I just wanted to call that out. A bit of a decrease in their sales compared to before. That's why it's not really that impactful for the share price. But despite that, I would still say that there's still a nice increase compared to what we saw in 2024. Now, moving forward, Goldman maintains a sell rating for NIO. The price price ratio is still kind of flat right now. We're going to be watching to see if this changes. And besides that, Tuesdays are historically green about 55% of the time, so very promising for tomorrow. Besides that, there's not really a whole lot else that's coming out. Now, looking at my previous videos, I had these notes that I took about the tariffs, and I mentioned one thing that could be used that could benefit the US, at least to some extent, is that tariffs could be used as a negotiation tactic. And I think that we had that in the back of our minds, even though there was a lot of fear building amidst these tariffs. So there's still a lot of pros and cons of them. I try to be very unbiased when I say that. There will be bad things that happen when these tariffs are officially imposed, but then there's also some good things that they could be used for, such as trying to increase government revenue that could be reinvested into the US. With that being said, guys, if the tariffs were imposed today, or even like over the weekend officially, and they maintain that, that would be a little bit more negative, at least for the economy. Just for the short term, it would cause like a contraction to GDP and factors like that. That's why the market got an initial sell-off. But with the news that these tariffs have been delayed, the reason that happens because of some negotiations that were being done. So this is more positive for the markets because for the short term, these tariffs are not going to be enacted, at least for the next month. They may be enacted next month, but they're just delayed for now. But basically, Donald Trump wanted to increase tariffs, threatening to increase them by 25%. And then what happened was we saw some negotiations that happened very quickly. So the first negotiations happened between the U.S. and Mexico. The news came out that after negotiating, we saw the presidents of Mexico and Trump basically once again call one another, and then they came up with a nice deal. So what's happening is the tariffs ended up getting delayed, okay, for 30 days. So that's the first thing that's happening so far. And then Mexico agreed that they're going to reinforce their northern border with 10,000 members of the country's National Guard. They're going to be addressing a lot of issues. So that is something that Trump was negotiating for. And then there's other factors as well. But just keep that in mind, guys. That's what's going on, at least thus far. So as time goes on, these negotiations have come out, and that is causing a delay, which is a little bit more positive. Then we saw Trump and Trudeau. They basically communicated, and we saw something else that's very big. Trudeau had also announced that the US is going to suspend its plans for 25% tariffs on Canadian goods, and then Trump confirmed that. So that's some good news. The trade war is on hold for the time being. Trudeau said that basically they're going to be holding their plans to impose new tariffs, at least for the time being. And they negotiated. And as a part of this, they have agreed that they also want to secure their northern border, or at least it's going to be their southern border in the north for the US. So the Canadian US border is going to be a lot more secure because they also want to devote 10,000 personnel to protect the border. Canada is also committing to they're going to be continue to invest in that and do a lot of different things involved. So both Canada and Mexico are going to add to border security, sending 10,000 troops each on each of the sides. They did this, and as a result, Trump has announced that he's going to delay the tariffs by 1 month, and they may continue to negotiate for different things. That was part of his tactic to try to get what he wanted to get done. So far, it worked, but this isn't the end of the story because he's still threatening that these tariffs will come in about a month from now. So when 1 month passes, we'll see what that leads to when we approach the tariff deadline. Will they officially be enacted? Will they be lessened? We'll have to wait and see. I would argue that nothing's 100% official yet. But once again, if they are imposed, there are some effects we have to consider because we are very, very important trade partners with Mexico, Canada, and China. With that being said, what else is going on? Tomorrow is going to be Tuesday, February 4th, 2025. We have the JOLTS job openings and job quits reports at 10 o'clock a.m. And besides that, there's nothing else that's too crazy that's coming out. We just had earnings that came out as well. So please note that today we just got Palantir. Tomorrow we have PayPal and Spotify in the morning. And then we have AMD and Alphabet after market close. So for Palantir, we saw the share price absolutely explode because their full year forecast absolutely exceeded the estimates. So that's good news, at least for them. We saw their sales to be about $3.75 billion in 2025. That is absolutely incredible. That's better than what analysts were expecting at $3.5 billion instead. And operating income is going to be better than expected as well. So great growth overall. Their fourth quarter revenue jumped 36% to about $827.5 million. That is above estimates of about $776 million. On top of this, we saw their profits at about 14 cents a share. That's above expectations as well. So good growth, especially with the fact that they're now building and deepening their connections with the U.S. Defense Department. And we're starting to see their commercial gains continue to increase. Good guidance overall. And with the technology that's now being used across the U.S. branches, it's very, very bullish news. The share price is up almost 20%. It's absolutely exploding. Bullish news so far. The fear and greed index is currently at fear. There's a lot of fear that was building, but I think this is going to neutralize as time goes on. The market hit extreme fear. It should try to bounce a little bit, at least as time goes on. The put to call option ratio started to go up as you start to see more of these puts being bought. As soon as people started loading the boat on puts, the market started to squeeze them all over again. And the VIX has a big gap to fill, so I'll be watching this very closely. So, with that being said, what do I see for the share prices for tomorrow? Tomorrow, I just want to say there might be a lot of volatility, but I think that the charts look like they want to rebound a little bit more, especially because these tariffs were just delayed. So if we see a small dip here on NIO, we could attempt to push for about 4.4. Might see a small pullback before it tries to continue to push higher, which is going to be the most likely possibility. What else is good is the VIX is starting to come down. I think that the VIX has this big gap to fill all the way down towards 17. Might push before it starts to dip a little bit more as the market tries to push higher. So there might be a small push coming. The market's in a range, but I just want to say the 4-hour on SPY is showing some life. If we could try to hold above 601.5, if we hold this tomorrow, we could try to push for about 605. Then we'll see. The closer we get to these highs, we'll see if we get another rejection back down like this. We're just going back and forth. We went up, down, up, down. So we might be pushing a little bit higher for 605. If not, if we break that, we go up to like the 608 to 610 area again for a small push higher. Then we'll see a rejection back down most likely, as I think we're just going to remain volatile. So that's what I'm leaning towards on SPY. QQQ is looking bullish, especially as we have PayPal's earnings tomorrow. So we'll see that that ends up affecting us. But for now, I do anticipate that there might be some upside for an attempt to get back to the 525 or so area. And once we get to close to 530, we do tend to reject and make a move back down. Once again, going back and forth between these levels. For others out there, we have the Russell 2000. This is trying to push for about 226, and we'll see if we reject back down. We're currently just going back and forth between these levels, but I'm favoring that we might be pushing for 226.5 or above before we see a move back down. As far as ES goes, Same thing, it's looking bullish on the PPO here. May attempt to push this imbalance towards 6,100. If we break 66, I'm looking for 6,100 as our target, but then it could turn back down after that. So there's going to likely be a lot of volatility. NQ dumped only to recover after the news came out that the tariffs are delayed. May try to push a little bit more for about the 21,700 area before it tries to turn. So I see a little bit more upside. Bitcoin's back up of 101,000 might be dipping, might be pushing for 104,000. Nvidia got a relatively not so good close, but it's trying to push into after hours. I think it might push to fill this gap tomorrow, so it might be going for about 120. We'll see if you reject or not. Tesla's looking so. It does have this gap to fill above here, but overall, we're just in a giant wedge on Tesla. We're just going like back and forth between these levels. So we could get a small bounce. I could see it attempt to bounce a little bit tomorrow for about that like 395 to 397 area. We also have this gap to fill at 402, so it might be a small push to the upside. But then it might come back down, just kind of consolidate like this, at least as time goes on. As Tesla's getting tighter and tighter. But I'm hoping that as long as we try to hold above 386, our 200 EMA, this may try to push for 395 and eventually attempt to fill this gap just temporarily. Apple's trying to rebound. Inverse head and shoulders like setup. We have a gap up here to fill. If we get back above 230 tomorrow, we're looking for 233 as our targets. Might try to rebound first before we see some more downside, possibly later on. AMD has earnings tomorrow. Might be pushing for about 116. We'll see if buyers defend it. Coin is looking for an attempt at 290. If we break that, we're looking for 295. Amazon's pushing for 240. We'll see if we break this as we're approaching earnings very soon. There may be more buyers coming and trying to push this to 242.5 and eventually 245. Meta looks more bullish. As long as we're above 700, we're looking for 710 as our target. Microsoft is looking pretty decent. As long as we try to break past 412, we're looking for an attempt to get up to about 415. And then Google might be trying to push right back up towards all-time highs. We have earnings as well, I think, tomorrow. So there might be buyers that try to defend this. So the whole market looks like it wants to bounce. I think the VIX is going to push a bit, then maybe reject, come back down to fill this gap towards 17. I think the market may try to push, and this could help NIO try to push for 4.4. Small dip, then a bounce for 4.4 is most likely coming. With that being said, I thank you for listening, guys. Have a good one, and peace out.